Well, good morning. It is great to be here. Thanks so much for leading that congregational prayer, Gary. I agree with you, Gary, when you were talking about trying to come up with words to say and things to pray about, and then we do worship songs like that. I'm not even sure I need to preach. But I will speak what God has given me to share with you guys. So first off, little introduction. I have a wife, Teresa, and I have 4 boys. Yes, you heard that correctly, 4 boys. It is a loud house. We have an apartment that we rent out in our basement, a little 1-bedroom apartment, helps pay the bills, right? And every time prospective tenants come through our house, we just tell them, look, if you're looking for a peaceful place to live, this is not it. And then we actually get our boys to run down the hallway on the hardwood floors just so they can see what it sounds like. So that's a bit of my crazy life. My wife, Teresa, is actually away this weekend. She's at a wilderness first aid course. She's like way up in the bush somewhere north of Kingston, learning how to do wilderness first aid because she loves camping, and I do too, but she's away for this weekend. And all my boys are other places too. So 3 of my boys are at a camp working this weekend, and then one of my other sons, he's actually leading worship at our home church back in Coburg this morning. So I'm all here alone. Like no family came with me. I feel super loved, I gotta be honest. But good news, for those of you that don't know, I actually do have family here. Krista Ritzkas is my twin sister. So this is pretty awesome. I am 5 minutes older. Just clarify that. Make sure everyone remembers that. 5 minutes older. I kind of feel like I'm better looking. But it's debatable, I know. But definitely Krista's got all the smarts. She took all the brains in the womb. I'm just kind of hanging out with whatever I got. So really glad to be here. As was mentioned before, I serve as the executive director of Northumberland Youth Unlimited, which is a Youth for Christ chapter from Youth for Christ Canada. And the work that we do, we rely on the support of our community. We rely on the support of our individuals and businesses and churches as well. So I want to thank you guys for your financial support of our ministry. And the fact is, because of great partners like you, we get to make a meaningful difference in the lives of young people. So at Youth Unlimited, at Youth for Christ, we exist to see every young person living fully in Christ. And the word every is important. You see, we see the hope and potential in every young person. The word every is important. Now, every's a lot. Every is a lot. And it can be overwhelming, but it drives us to action. And it keeps us focused on the mission of Jesus. You see, we engage and equip youth to know and follow Jesus. And to do that, we actually need to be for our community of youth. So what does it mean to be for our community? Well, if you have your Bible with you, go to Luke chapter 5. It'll be on the screen as well. Luke chapter 5. We're going to start at verse 27, and I'll be reading from the New Living Translation. Luke 5, verse 27. Later, as Jesus left the town, he saw a tax collector named Levi sitting at his tax collector's booth. "Follow me and be my disciple," Jesus said to him. So Levi got up, left everything, and followed him. Later, Levi held a banquet in his home with Jesus as the guest of honor, and many of Levi's fellow tax collectors and other guests also were with them. But the Pharisees and the teachers of religious law complained bitterly to Jesus' disciples. "Why do you eat and drink with such scum, such outsiders?" And Jesus answered them, "Healthy people don't need a doctor, sick people do. I have come to call not those who think they are righteous, but those who know they are sinners and need to repent." So the truth is, we all have outsiders in our lives. The people we look down to, the people we think are different from us, less than. And every time in history has had outsiders. And in Jesus' time, the different people, the outsiders, were prostitutes, people who drank and ate too much, people with diseases that made them ceremoniously unclean and had to stay outside of the town, and really anyone that wasn't a member or a part of the Jewish people group, and tax collectors. So tax collectors were these Jews who collected taxes on behalf of the Roman oppressors. Now, a lot of tax collectors not only collected the taxes, but they often increased the amount of money they would get so they could pocket the extra money. And their fellow Jews hated tax collectors. They were traitors. They were looked down on and despised. And if you were a good Jew, you stayed away from tax collectors as much as possible. And in our time today, in 2022, some of the outsiders, those we see as different, are people suffering from mental and physical health challenges, people living in social housing, people from other faith groups and cultures, immigrants, people of color, indigenous peoples, the LGBTQ community. See, we all have outsiders, don't we? And our own outsider as an individual person can be very different than somebody else's outsider, but we all have outsiders. And I love this story, this interaction that Jesus has, because Jesus brings value to an outsider in his society. And what we learn from Jesus, he was always about the outsiders. He was always about the unwanted, those that are viewed different. See, Jesus hung out with the very people that Jews weren't supposed to hang out with. Like, think about that for a second. Jesus Christ, the Son of God, comes to earth and chooses to hang out with people that they shouldn't hang out with. You see, this interaction with Jesus was shocking to the Jews, but life-changing for Levi. And I got to kind of wonder, we don't see it in the story, but I kind of wonder, as Jesus is walking through the marketplace and he goes to Levi, what are all the people around him thinking? So in this interaction, Jesus shows us what real love looks like. He shows us what being for our community looks like. So being for our community starts with seeing our community, every member of our community. Jesus saw a tax collector. According to the Helps word studies, the Greek word used here means to see, to concentrate on, so as to significantly impact or influence the viewer. See, seeing is just not observing. Jesus saw Levi, he concentrated on Levi in that moment, and then he acted. And over the past year, we've been painfully reminded of our tragic treatment of our indigenous peoples through policies such as residential schools, a system designed to assimilate indigenous children by removing them from their families and suppressing their culture. We see the news reports. We like and share the social media posts. But have we really seen? Have we actually concentrated on this tragedy? Has it influenced us to action? You see, this isn't distant history. The last residential school closed in 1997. I was in high school from 1990 to 1995. So when I was playing volleyball with my buddies at school, another young person the same age as me was in a residential school. And when I was experiencing the freedom to learn about Jesus in my youth group at church, another young person my age was being shamed for his culture in the very building that his ancestors were abused, beaten, and even murdered. See, this should bother us. This is not okay. Youth for Christ Canada is running a workshop series called Indigenous and Settler Relations, and we've been learning from our Indigenous neighbors. And I've been learning and discovering, and my eyes are being opened. You see, seeing isn't just observing. Seeing requires action. And if we don't know what to do, learning is the great first step. A few months ago, I had the opportunity to be on a Zoom call with Chief Dave Mowat from Alderville First Nations, about 20 minutes north of Cobourg, where I live. And Chief Dave, he told us that the best response to the mass graves being found was education. He said, if people will just learn, they will understand and they will change. He wasn't saying that, we should go and protest everything. He was saying, educate yourself. And what I've been learning over the last year is it takes a whole lot more courage to live with a learning posture than it does to stick to what we've always known. Let me say that again. It takes more courage to live with a learning posture than it does to stick to what we've always known. And what I'm learning is that our relationship with Indigenous people is broken, and it has been for hundreds of years, and our relationship needs healing. But to heal brokenness, we must be honest and humble enough to recognize our part in that brokenness. Jesus says in Matthew 7, don't pick on people, jump on their failures, criticize their faults, unless, of course, you want the same treatment. That critical spirit has a way of boomeranging. You know, it's easy to see a smudge on your neighbor's face and be oblivious to the ugly smear on your own. Do you have the nerve to say, let me wash your face for you, when your own face is distorted by contempt? It's this whole traveling roadshow mentality all over again, playing a holier-than-thou part instead of just living your part. Wipe that ugly sneer off her face, and you might be fit enough to offer a washcloth to your neighbor. So let's stop pretending that we have this whole thing figured out, that we as white settlers have all the answers. You know, September 30th is the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. June 21st this month is National Indigenous Peoples Days. And those are great days to start learning with humility and honesty, to start seeing our Indigenous peoples, really seeing them. You see, when we learn, we discover our part in the brokenness, and we see people the way that Jesus sees them, created in his image, deserving of love and acceptance, just as they are. Being for our community means healing brokenness in our community. And often, that healing work starts with you and I. And that's just one example. Indigenous peoples is just one example of many different areas that we could be making a real difference in learning and understanding about people. He saw a tax collector named Levi. 1 Samuel 16 verse 7 says, man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. You see, Levi was the son of a tax collector. So he's a tax collector, the son of a tax collector. He's in the family business. Like, he's firmly stuck in the outsider world. And in that culture, when you were a boy, it was expected that you would take on the family business. You would continue on. So he's stuck in the outsider world. Everybody hated Levi. But see, Jesus, he sees Levi and he acts. And he sees the potential in Levi that no one else did. Jesus saw him for who he could be, not for who he was. And do you know what happened to Levi? Like, he did follow Jesus. He left his, like it says in the Bible, right? In the scripture, he left his tax collector's booth and walked away and followed Jesus. He became a disciple of Jesus. He lived with Jesus for 3 years. And he writes this book titled Matthew, which is in the Bible. Levi is Matthew. So Levi, this guy that nobody around him thought had any potential, and in fact thought was worse than the worst Jew you could find, is the guy that writes the book of Matthew, which is part of the Bible that transforms humanity. See, Jesus saw Levi's potential and then provided the space and time to grow into that potential, to become a world changer. And the question that we have to ask ourselves when it comes to the outsiders that we have, are different people than us, is when we see people around us, do we see their potential, or do we see what we think their limitations or failures are? Before I worked with Youth Unlimited, Youth for Christ, I worked in youth justice at a correctional facility in Peterborough, and we worked with a lot of tough youth. A wide variety of charges, anything from just minor, break and enter, to sexual offenses and major assault charges. And I remember there's this one kid that we had. We had him for basically his entire adolescence. So by the time he turned 12, he already had his first charge. We got him when he was 13, and he was in and out multiple times, like a revolving door, all the way until his 18th birthday. And so we got to know him really, really well. And he had a lot of serious charges. And one of the things that we found interesting about him is that he had a lot of assault charges, and so he really didn't get along well with basically kids his own age. He was always getting into fights. He got suspended. He got expelled from every school in his district. He literally could not go to a school because of all the fights he had. But one of the things that we discovered when he came into our facility, probably the second or third time, is that one thing that he enjoyed was interacting with adults. Like literally, like he loved interacting with adults. He just had this, I don't know, comfort level, this respect for adults. It was really interesting. So we decided that we wanted to make a difference in his life. And so as a staff team, we decided that we wanted to model some certain things to him. And one of the things that he struggled with, even in his relationship with adults, he struggled with manners. In his mind, they were completely non-existent. They didn't serve any purpose. I just need what I want. I'm going to get it. Like that was his whole thing. So as a staff team, we decided that we were going to model that to him. So we didn't require him to use manners, but we modeled manners to him. Every single time he came into our facility, we modeled manners to him until he left. And then we wait a month or two until he came back, and we do it all over again. And then there was something happened on a Saturday morning. And I remember I was working that Saturday morning. It was like a 7 to 7 shift, and so I was there early. And he gets up around, 11 o'clock in the morning. We let them sleep in on Saturdays because, after all, they're teenagers. And he comes downstairs to do his laundry. And he says, Tony, can I have the laundry soap, please? I'm like, what? In my mind. But I'm trying to play it cool, right? Don't make a big deal of it. So I give him the laundry. So I unlock the cabinet because, of course, everything's locked up in this place. So I unlock the cabinet, give him the laundry soap, and I'm like, sure, here you go. And he says, thanks. And I'm like, what? Like there's two manners in a row. So he goes downstairs, does this, he loads the washing machine, comes back upstairs. He's like half asleep, right? And he's walking up the stairs back to his bedroom, and then he stops. And he comes back down the stairs, runs back to the staff office where I was, and he says, Tony, I use my manners. It was incredible. But here's the thing. 3 years it took for him to use his manners. And this was a kid that nobody thought would amount to anything. Everybody assumed that this kid, when he turned 18, would be in an adult correctional facility. Everybody did. And that day was the start of something incredible for this young man. 2 years ago, he bought his first house. He works for a construction company. He hasn't been in jail since he left our facility. And here's the thing, when you recognize someone's potential, not look at their outside, right? Because you look at this kid, you would think, oh my goodness, he's a write-off. And a lot of people wrote him off. When we see someone's potential and give them the space to grow, they can become their own life changer. So man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. So let's look at people's hearts. Let's see who they could be. Let's look at their potential. Follow me and be my disciple. I've always understood this word follow to mean follow behind, right? Like I'm a parent, and so, the kids are like, follow me, right? You need to go somewhere, so your kids, and that's always been my understanding of this word follow, is follow behind or like follow the leader. But when I actually look at the original Greek used here, it means to accompany, to join. And Vine's expository dictionary defines it as expressing union, likeness, and going in the same way. You see, Jesus wasn't inviting Levi to learn from him in the traditional teacher-student sense, but rather to learn with him. And if we take this word follow, as it's defined, and we use a common modern kind of English phrase, it would be more like this: come with me. I love this invitation. Jesus sees this outsider, this person that's different from everybody, this tax collector, this nobody. He sees his potential and invites him to become part of my family, learn a new way of life, come with me. And Levi's entire world changes when he accepts Jesus' invitation to come with him. So the people that I view as different from me, the outsiders in my community, I got to ask myself when I see this experience that Levi had, do I invite them to come with me? Do I include them in my daily life? Or do I keep them pushed safely to the outside? Later, Levi held a great banquet with Jesus as the guest of honor. So Jesus says, follow me. And then he goes to Levi's house. Like, that doesn't make any sense. He just said, follow me, come with me. Like, we're going this way. And then he goes to Levi's house. And he celebrates with Levi and with his people in his home. See, follow me is a relationship. It's come with me and I'll go with you. And how often do we view the outsiders in our life and maybe even have the courage to love them, but then we love them the way that we think is best, the way that we think they need to be loved. And see, we love them, but really only inside of our own comfort zone. And then there's Jesus. He goes to where Levi lives. He hangs out with Levi's friends and celebrates with them. And you know who Levi's friends were? All the outsiders, all the people that Jews weren't supposed to hang out with. Tax collectors, prostitutes, thieves, murderers. Those are all the people hanging out in Levi's house. And Jesus is in the middle of that. Not only that, but he's at a party that Levi holds with all of his outsider friends, and Jesus is the guest of honor. Like, that just culturally threw everything out the window. And obviously the Pharisees were pretty ticked off about that. We see that, right? But just amazing, the stuff that Jesus does, totally countercultural. So what we see here is this: Jesus loving people where they are, unconditionally. Acceptance, love, celebration. And what we don't see here are requirements for Levi and his friends to change in order to be with Jesus. So one of the things that I get to do through my Youth Unlimited ministry is I get to serve as the team chaplain of the Coburg Cougars hockey team. It's a great junior A hockey team, love it. And, it's really pushed me out of my comfort zone because I didn't grow up playing hockey. I love hockey. I'm a great hockey fan. Go Leafs go, I think. Depends every year. We'll get past the first round. Never mind. Anyway, so yeah, I love hockey, but I never played hockey, so I was never around hockey culture. And so this was definitely something that really took me out of my comfort zone. And so this one year, there's this hockey player. We'll call him Bob. And Bob and I were very, very different. So Bob played hockey. I didn't play hockey. Bob was athletic. I am not athletic. Bob used a lot of four-letter words, and I try not to use four-letter words. So we're very different. But one of the things I loved about Bob is that we were able to kind of build a really good relationship. And I noticed during chapel sessions, he would kind of lean in. You know, they just kind of sit on the edge of their bench, and they're kind of leaning in. I'm over there, and he's kind of leaning in. And so I noticed that he was just kind of engaging more. So I just kind of built a relationship with him. We'd go out for coffee together. We'd go for a walk. Chats at the rink after practice or after a game. And, we just built a relationship over 6 months. And over that 6 months, Bob continued to be Bob. Hockey, athletic, four-letter words. And that season, we hosted the national championship in Coburg. And we were the underdogs. Everybody expected Coburg to lose. Except we only lost one game leading to the final championship game. So we're in the finals. We're in the final game. We're down 2-1 against the best team in the country. We're down 2-1 with 68 seconds left in the third period, and then we score. We're going to overtime. It was awesome. Like, I can still remember just that experience, being in this rink, 2,000 people all sold out. So we go into overtime, and there's 8 minutes and 21 seconds into overtime. There's a face-off in the opponent's zone, and it was right in front of me. I was sitting right on the blue line, so I could see the whole thing right there. It was awesome. And, Cougars get the puck. They win the face-off. They get the puck. They set up a play. And Bob scores from just inside the blue line. Like, the crowd went nuts. Like, it was just like everyone's cheering, yeah! Like, we just won Coburg, a little town of Coburg, won the national championship. It was incredible. So I head down from the seats to celebrate with the guys on the ice. And as I'm walking down the tunnel, I see Bob. He's already off the ice. And he took his jersey off. He's still got everything else on. He's walking on his skates, and he sees me from 40 feet away. And he's like, Tony, we bleeping did it! And then he runs up and gives me a giant, sweaty bear hug. See, I love that memory. Not because we won a national championship. although that was pretty awesome. I love that memory because in that moment, I experienced something pretty special. See, Bob invited me into his world. Bob didn't feel the need to be different because the chaplain was around. Bob was just simply Bob. And he invited me into his life. That was in 2017. And Bob and I still talk. He lives in the States. He's playing pro hockey, not NHL level, but level below. And we still talk, and he still talks about that memory. So what I've learned through all of this is that when I'm in the rink, I'm in their world. I step out of my comfort zone, out of what's familiar to me, and I hang out with people that are different than me. See, Jesus hung out with people who were different than him all the time. See, Jesus' love is unconditional and has no boundaries. So who in your life could you hang out with in their homes, with their people? Who do you need to come with? The Pharisees asked Jesus' disciples, "Why do you eat and drink with such scum, such outsiders?" Jesus answered them, "Healthy people need a doctor. Don't need a doctor. Sick people do." You see, it's really easy to love healthy people, right? Like the people that have it all together, you know, the nice people, the people where their kids use all their manners, please and thank you, and they're polite, and their grass is cut all the time, and they don't, you know, like it's really easy to love the healthy people. But loving people who are different than us is a lot harder. It pushes us out of our comfort zone. It requires humility, patience, and compassion. Last year, we hired a part-time youth worker because we saw a need for connection. In the middle of all this pandemic stuff, we saw a deep need for young people to have connection with people. And so we hired this part-time youth worker, Connie. And Connie's amazing. She loves youth and their parents with compassion and without judgment. And many of the families that Connie works with live in social housing. Now, Connie and her volunteers, they see a lot of challenges, but also a lot of gifts, strengths, and love. But some people in our community would view these families as the outsiders, people that are different than them. But Connie goes to these neighborhoods several times a week and mentors young people who live in the margins of our society. And during the pandemic, for many of these young people, their meetings with Connie and her volunteers were the only time they saw another person outside of their family. And that inspired us to some action, right? So you see something and you act. So our action was, we were concerned that when the longest lockdown, remember that crazy lockdown over Christmas and New Year's a year and a bit ago when that was announced? We were concerned. Connie said to me, she's like, "Tony, like, does that mean I'm not going to be able to see the youth anymore?" And she was concerned about that. So we called our local health unit. We explained who we are and what we do. And thankfully, we're very grateful for that, and God certainly played a big part in that, the health unit designated us an essential service. So what that meant was during the lockdown, when everybody else stopped, we were able to continue meeting with youth, one-on-one, in person, outdoors, with all the masks and all the stuff, right? We had all the public health guidelines, but we could meet with them in person. And I often say that, I say to Connie, Connie, like, you're the right person for this job, right? And she's like, "Well, what do you mean?" I says, "Well, Ontario stopped and you didn't." And here's what we're learning. Jesus, he gave value to people wherever he went. And when we give value to people, when we are in relationship with people, trust is developed, and then spiritual conversations get to take place. See, relationship matters. Every person deserves to know that they matter to someone. Every person. Margaret J. Wheatley said this: "It's not our differences that divide us, it's our judgments about each other that do." And I wonder, how many times have I missed out on an interaction of love and compassion because of how I've judged someone? as I've driven down the road, or I've walked down the hallway, or I've watched something on TV or on my smartphone. What we don't know about a person is the very barrier to understanding and loving them. What we don't know about a person is the very barrier to understanding and loving them. So my question for us is, do you wish that your community wasn't so broken? Like, when you look at things on your phone, and you see all this stuff that scrolls through, all the news feed, right? Does that frustrate you? Does it bother you? When you're walking down the street, does it bother you when you see the brokenness? When you're driving down Simcoe, right? When you see the homeless people on the corner, does it bother you? Do you wish that your community wasn't so broken? Then love the people around you. Invite them into relationship with you. Learn about their lives. Go to where they are and celebrate with them. Jesus says in Matthew 22, verse 37, "You must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. A second is equally important. Love your neighbor as yourself." The entire law and all the demands of the prophets are based on these two commandments. What's interesting here is that sometimes I feel like we read this, especially us, lifer Christians who grew up in the church, right? We read this and we go, okay, first commandment, love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. Got it. But then we forget that what Jesus says is a second is equally important. It's not first love God, and then if you feel like it, love others. It's up there, equal. Love God, love others. End of story. You see, we can tell people about Jesus, but if we don't love them like Jesus, our words are pretty empty. We can tell people about Jesus, but if we don't love them like Jesus, our words are empty. I'd like to read a different version of the passage we read at the beginning. This version is the First Nations version. It's a new indigenous translation of the New Testament. It's written in English by Native North Americans for Native North Americans and all English-speaking peoples. And it was released in partnership with several organizations, including Wycliffe Associates and One Book, which have over 50 years of Bible translation experience. Luke 5, verse 27 to 32. After this, he taught again by the lake shore. As he walked by, he saw a tribal tax collector sitting at his tax booth. The name of this tribal tax collector was He Brings Together, Levi. Creator Sets Free, Jesus, went to him and said, "Come, walk the road with me." He got up from his booth, left it all behind, and began to walk the road with him. He Brings Together, Levi, hosted a great feast for Creator Sets Free, Jesus. He invited all his friends to come, tribal tax collectors along with other outcasts who were all sitting around the table with Creator Sets Free, Jesus. When the separated ones, Pharisees, and the scroll keepers saw Creator Sets Free eating with outcasts, they complained to his followers, saying, "Why does your wisdom keeper keep company with tribal tax collectors and outcasts?" Creator Sets Free overheard them and said, "People who are well do not need medicine. I have not come for the ones with good hearts. No, I have come to help the outcasts find the path back home again." Let's put ourselves in this story for a moment. I'd like everyone to close your eyes. So take a moment with your eyes closed and think of a person or a people group who might be an outsider in your own personal life. And I want you to be brutally honest with yourself. You're not sharing this with anybody, so don't worry. There's no scorekeeping or anything. Be honest with yourself. Think about what people group or person do I view as an outsider or different than myself? So picture that person or group in your mind. Maybe it's an indigenous person or a person of color. Maybe it's an immigrant or someone from a different faith group. Maybe it's a person with physical or mental challenges. Maybe it's the homeless person outside your workplace. Maybe it's a member of the LGBT community. Maybe that in particular is a little extra meaningful for you this month with being Pride Month and seeing rainbow flags everywhere. So can you see them? Can you see that person or that group? So with your eyes closed, I want you to imagine that you and Jesus are walking down your street. And you're enjoying this amazing time with Jesus. You feel loved, valued, cared for. And you and Jesus turn a corner, and there's your outsider person or group sitting on the side, minding their own business. And then Jesus walks right over to them and invites them to come with him, to walk the road with him. And because you're with Jesus, he's basically invited them to walk with you too. So what are you thinking? How do you respond? Do you respond like the Pharisees, the separated ones? Or do you respond like Jesus, acceptance, love, and celebration? You can open your eyes. Thanks for doing that with me. You see, Jesus commands us to love our neighbor as ourselves. Loving our neighbor means healing brokenness. Loving our neighbor means being for our community. And if this is the command, then I've got to ask myself some pretty hard questions. First question that I have to ask myself, who am I inviting to walk the road with me and why? Second, harder question, who am I not inviting and why not? And do my thoughts and actions help my community find the path back home to Jesus? And what I'm learning in working with youth and working with the Cougars that are different than me, what we're learning in our ministry, in our lives, is that helping our community find the path back home to Jesus is less about making judgments, less about convincing them that they are wrong, less about arguing that we are right, and more about loving them unconditionally with no strings attached, just like Jesus did. I got a phone call from a billet mom from the Cougars a few months ago. And she was concerned about her billet son, the hockey player that was living with them, because he had suffered an injury, and he was just really struggling. And so he was going to physio, he was going to the chiropractor, all that kind of stuff. But she could sense that mentally and emotionally, it was just really affecting him. And you got to understand too, when you're at this level of hockey, you are playing junior A hockey because you're trying to get a commit to NCAA. You're looking for a scholarship to get to the next level. That's why you're there. You're not there just for fun. And so the pressure these guys feel are incredible. And so she asked me, so like, would you meet with him? Like, do you do that? I'm like, yeah, absolutely I do that. That's part of my job. And so I went to have coffee with him. He said, let's go for a walk. So we walked downtown Coburg. And, I knew him a little bit, didn't have a super close relationship with him, but I did, he was at chapel. I connected with him on a regular basis. We do chapel every 2 weeks, so I got to, get to know him a little bit. So we're walking, drinking coffee and walking downtown Coburg, and he's sharing with me some of his struggles. And I was actually kind of surprised how open he was being with me. But he's sharing with me some of his struggles and stuff, and so he shares for a bit, and I say, okay, so it sounds like you're doing a lot. You've got a good plan on physically how you're, medically how you're addressing this. I said, how can I help you in the next 2 weeks? Because he kind of had a 2-week deadline, kind of goal for him. So I said, how can I help you in the next 2 weeks? He says to me, can we do that prayer thing you do at chapel? Sure. So I'm walking down the street, and I couldn't close my eyes because I can't close my eyes and walk at the same time. So I'm praying for him, and we're walking down Coburg, downtown Coburg. People are walking by, whatever. I'm praying for him, praying with him and stuff. And afterward, I'm praying. He says, I really like the way that you pray. It's like you're actually talking to God. So what followed was a 45-minute conversation about everything you can imagine under the sun when it comes to faith and spirituality. And see, here's the thing that I've been learning, is that I didn't come to that conversation prepared with a presentation of the gospel. I didn't. I had nothing in my back pocket. I didn't know what to expect, nothing prepared. Two things that happened that day that I learned. If I'm present and ask good questions, God does his thing. That was it. That's all I did. I just showed up. And I asked a question. I didn't tell him what he should do. I didn't give him advice. I didn't tell him he should pray more. I didn't tell him he should go to church. Just asked him a question. That was it. So I just want to encourage us. Let's love the people around us. Whoever God places in front of us, let's love the people around us. Let's look for the outsiders in our own world and love them. Let's include them into our lives as Jesus included Levi. Let's invite them into a relationship with us. Let's learn about their lives. Go to where they are and celebrate with them. You see, when you love like Jesus, in partnership with Jesus, lives are changed, including yours. Let's pray. God, I just thank you. Oh, I thank you for this incredible interaction that Levi, this outsider, this nobody, this traitor of the Jews, had with your son. I thank you for the example that Jesus has given us in your word of how we can love people unconditionally. God, I pray that you would give us courage to love the way Jesus did. That you would give us humility to set aside our own preconceived ideas and notions and beliefs and thinking and learn. Help us to learn about people that are different than us so that you can do your thing. God, we thank you that you invite us to be in partnership with you in the work that you're already doing in the lives of people around us. So God, we thank you for who you are. Thank you for inviting us, for blessing us, for giving us gifts and abilities, and for pushing us out of our comfort zone. We pray these things in your name.